Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Accuracy in America. I am your host, Don Irvine, and my co-host, ensconced away in Northern Virginia, Brian McNichol.
Hello, deplorables, dregs, despicables, chumps, Neanderthals, dog-faced pony soldiers, and semi-fascists.
Yeah, yeah. Every time I think about this fascist or semi-fascist thing, for whatever reason, Robert Reich is in my Twitter feed when I check
Yeah,
it.
me too. It's like, what do I do?
Yeah, I don't know what I don't know
What
what
the heck button do you punch on that one?
I don't know what I did to deserve that. But besides he complaining about corporate billionaires and all this stuff, and conveniently forgetting people like George Soros and any billionaires on the left.
Right,
He
and
also
he's not sleeping under a bridge either.
yeah, right, right,
does.
exactly. And he talks about fascism, when it came up to the election and all this kind of stuff. And I'm just like, I don't know. It's that SMH shake my head
That's
about this with all of that. Okay, well, we're going to spend most of the time, I think, just kind of trying to break down what we know or what happened and everything else yesterday. The red wave that a lot of people predicted did not happen.
Yep.
I think last week we kind of tempered those expectations ourselves, right? I mean, we were not looking quite as optimistically at this as a lot of others. I do think that there is kind of an overhype by the media. They wanted, they kind of put this in the minds of a lot of people. So, which sets them up for the perfect message of, no red wave, no tsunami.
Total failure. That's right. That's a good point I was going to make is like the Republicans probably will now. It's from what I'm hearing out west, end up with control of both houses of Congress. That's not a loss, right? Okay, it's only the only thing they lost to was expectations, right? It was supposedly a much bigger wave, right? But it's they're going to end up with almost definitely control of the House, and is looking better and better for control of the Senate. It looks like Laxalt has a good chance to win in Nevada, and Blake Masters could even win. There's a lot of votes out in about 600,000 votes uncounted in Arizona. And they all should be overwhelmingly Republican, judging from where they come.
Yeah. So I mean, there are some races that I think we talked about. We thought that maybe Patty Murray might have been in trouble, but that didn't prove to be the case. Bolduc didn't really have the momentum that some gave him, and it wasn't really close like people thought it was going to be.
So those were ones we both mentioned.
Right.
As they've come a long way back and run a good campaign, but probably going to fall short.
Right. But as you were mentioning, I mean, Arizona and Nevada, it's going to take a little while for them to go through and count these votes and see where we are. Though I did see a CNN report this morning when I was at the gym that what the guy there was saying is just that I think there are votes yet to be counted. There's areas of strength there. I mean, Laxalt is doing good, and he did very well in a county that tends to kind of predict the outcome of statewide elections. So we kind of keep crossing our fingers on that. But he looks like he's in good shape right now. But we've learned from previous elections that a lot of this stuff, when you're at this point, it really depends upon where the votes came from that have been counted. You mentioned Arizona. We've got a huge swath of votes. Will they be, overtly Republican? Hopefully so, but stranger things have happened. So this is not going to be decided quite yet. It would be amazing. I mean, if Blake Masters does pull this off, that takes a huge amount of pressure off the GOP. And you mentioned, I mean, yes, look, the Republicans are going to at least come away with control of the House. The margin, we really don't know. I mean, CNN, I think their margin this morning was, I think they had it at, I think they have the GOP count at, maybe getting to 221. I guess it was, or something like that. So 221 to 214. So that would be 7, a little bit bigger margin than the Democrats have had in this last Congress. I'm still hoping that, we get up closer to 230. I think the Republicans, really need, a 225 to 230 to be able to probably manage, their agenda and get their agenda through. Slim margins, are not going to mean much on that. But I like a little bit of a cushion in my mind, for that.
Yeah, I would, but it's like, the people who are winning house races are not going to wander off the reservation much, right? They got there by promising to be pretty faithful to Republican doctrine, such that it is. And so that's where I think I think, 3-4 votes is probably enough, right? That's Nancy made it work, for a long time with that. And there was very little going off the reservation there. They made sure she did a good job of, if she didn't have support, not letting it come to the floor. So she didn't lose a lot of votes. So, but, so there's an art to being a speaker too. So we shall see on that one. If we do get to a majority in the Senate, and here's a bold prediction, and people don't, people will laugh at this because it gets predicted a lot. It doesn't really happen. But, Mitch could be in trouble as the leader, because, the two senators, it looks like Schmidt is going to win in Missouri. So it'll be Schmidt and Hawley have both said that they won't support him, that both of Missouri senators that won't support Mitch for leader again. And there'll be those people in there who he said, were J.D. Vance, Masters if he wins, Laxalt, who he said were, who he was referring to when he talked about poor candidate quality, and Herschel Walker, right, who could still get over the finish line. So, if that happens, I don't know. You're starting to run into some serious votes against Mitch. And I think if the Republicans want to say, hey, we're freshening in our look, right? We got the signal that we weren't quite what you wanted in that election, even though you gave us control of both houses of Congress. That might start with finding a new leader.
Yeah, it's not the first time that there's been talk, about Mitch.
Right.
Mitch is a survivor, right?
He certainly is.
It's hard to put this guy down. He's amazing in that sense. Republicans, I think, I think they shoot themselves in the foot. I mean, McConnell, there's been tons of criticism, when things don't go very well, but he's
good at it. He's darn good at it. I mean,
look, he pumped in. I mean, he pumped in a lot of money to help the Republican candidates in the Senate, try to get over this finish line. If it doesn't work, it doesn't work. But they were willing to go ahead and put money behind, kind of candidates.
Yeah, but only when Republicans put a gun to their head, right? They weren't going to. They didn't want to help Masters. They didn't want to help Oz. They didn't want to help Vance, right? He was down on Vance bad. So, when you talk about, the candidate quality people, and I guess Oz, he's probably right, man. He lost to a vegetable. Stop thinking about that one for a minute. For one thing, True the Vote says that the entire Pennsylvania electoral file is on a server in China. And it's time for that to become public. If they can prove that, then you will have a lot of questions about Fetterman's election. That was a closer race, than I thought it was going to be. And then it looked like he had a chance to win there the last week or so. But the last second polls, reliability got called into question. A lot of Republican pollsters will have a lot to answer for here too. So, it'll be interesting to see how it shakes out.
Yeah, I've made mention of this before. I mean, I don't think that being a pollster is, now becoming quite a dangerous thing, because it is so hard. There's so many, the polls are getting so many things wrong now, so much more so than they used to be. But the electorate is so different. We have so many different ways of voting. We've got all this early voting. We've got the mail-in voting. So a lot of votes are locked in weeks, before election day, and before some things happen.
Right. And I think that, there's trust. The lack of trust in the electoral system extends to the pollsters, right? So, Republicans talk about it all the time. They lie to them, or they tell them, they don't refuse to answer the questions, all that. Okay. So where do they go to get the, accurate information? So, some holes, some gaps between polling and votes emerged here that probably weren't previously there or this large in this
Yeah,
way.
and you knew Fetterman was their campaign was concerned about how close this was going to be, because they filed that suit about the ballots, the undated ballot issues and things like that. And in a close election, maybe those would have mattered, at a point, but figuring that they were probably going to be mostly Democrat ballots. But I don't know. I mean, I think that when the law says you need to have them dated and signed and everything like that, then that's what has to happen. That they should not accept anything that doesn't meet the standard that's in the law for that. I mean, the ballots in Maryland, when you mail them in, you have to sign them and date them. Otherwise, they can be rejected. I mean, we know that. If you're I mean, part of that reasoning too, I think from the Democrats has been, well, you have a lot of senior citizens and they might forget the date. Well, so it happens. Okay. So that means, that means their ballot doesn't count, it's because if they, that's just it. Or if they didn't sign it correctly or whatever, when you go to a polling place, you've got, you have to sign off on your ballot there. So, it's just, it's one of those things where the Democrats, trying to gain an advantage in these things. There's no doubt, I think, that, mail-in balloting works to their advantage, more than anything else. But how it shifted this election, I don't know. Bob has got a long comment here.
Okay.
My principal. Okay.
So keep that up. Let's go through.
Okay. All right. You'll keep it up. All right.
Because man, it's a lot to remember. Okay. So yes, the pollsters, poor effort. I will give you that. It looks like he's right. Like we were just talking about, if you control the House, you can stop a lot of the Biden agenda, right? You're not going to get court packing and all this kind of stuff. What you will get is investigations, high profile hearings, a real look at Hunter Biden's laptop, all like that. I don't know about the Oz and McCormick. I mean, I think that's one where the voters went with the Trump endorsement mattered a lot, but I don't know. I don't know what the proof is that McCormick would have been a whole lot better candidate. I don't think Oz was a bad candidate. I think I do think the mistake that they made was they talked about they let it be a referendum on Fetterman. Is he too big a vegetable to be in the Senate, right? And at the end of the campaign, Fetterman cut a bunch of ads where, I mean, I'm sure it took him 1,000 takes to piece this together, but he's talking. And you can see the film cuts in the ads, right? You can see where they had to jam this all together. But he's talking. He doesn't seem like he's incapacitated, right? It's the same thing as like we talked about with Biden and Trump. The first Biden debate, Trump had told everybody he was incoherent and pooping himself and all this stuff. And then he gets up there and he doesn't, spit and drool all over the stage. You're like, oh, we got lied to about that. Cognitive dissonance, right? So, I think those part. And as for the move away from Trump and toward DeSantis, that'll work itself out. I don't, I think it is premature to think that DeSantis is the savior. There's time on that one, but yeah, the Trump imprimatur took a hit last night. The idea that we should just do whatever Trump says, amongst party faithful took a hit last night.
Yeah. Sure. So my take here is that I agree pretty much wholeheartedly here with what Bob has said. I do think that, Oz versus McCormick for an election like that, I think McCormick would have won. I mean, Oz took a number of hits. So I think the Democrats were somewhat effective in their carpet bagging, accusations. I think that definitely hit a nerve with some people. Was Oz the strongest candidate? No, I think McCormick would have been a little bit more polished. But that's what happens. I mean, this has been a long-standing problem of mine, a pet peeve of mine for years. It's just that Republicans do not always pick the best candidates. Democrats don't necessarily pick the best candidates either in some cases, but I think they actually do a little bit better job on some of these kind of head-to-head challenges of getting, at least people who are more qualified to run. I mean, and then they lose on their merits or whatever. But yeah, they
well, Democrats take it out of
opportunities
the hand
presented
of rank and
themselves for
file voters,
Republicans, you know,
right?
yeah, I mean, opportunities present themselves for the voters here, for Republicans to do something about it, and we didn't give them enough high quality candidates across the board to do what we want to do. Yet, as you said, because of Arizona, a huge question mark there. It may come out that they may wind up doing okay, on
Yeah.
this. My initial thing was that I thought, we're going to be anywhere from 51 on either side or smack dab where we are now at 50-50. It's still going to be really close,
Yeah.
on this whole thing. Yeah, move away from Trump, as you said. Trump took a hit, I think, in a lot of ways last night. Is DeSantis the savior? I think it's too early to say, but he had a big victory last night. Florida was great for the Republicans last night overall, so that does give him
Congress, House race, Marco Rubio run easily. They won Miami-Dade. I mean, that's one of the most, that's like winning New York City.
Yeah, I mean,
they have no idea. Like that's turning a huge, Democrat stronghold into a majority Republican jurisdiction. So, DeSantis is doing something right. The question is, does it transfer? Can you do that across the whole nation? And the idea, we think, well, he's not Trump. He won't get painted like Trump. He will get painted like Trump. He will be a Nazi and a racist and all this. And like 5 minutes after he announces. So, you're not getting a free ride on that. Right. There's already a lot of, the Democrats can see what's happening, too. They're already lining up a lot of sort of, hatred against him, too. So, I don't know. There's some other capable people out there. Mike Pompeo is one, who might come in and be pretty good candidates. I don't think that Nikki Haley is viable or anybody like that. It's going to have to be somebody who, if you're not a, Trump's endorsed candidate, you're at least on friendly terms with the Trump agenda. Because I mean, that's what our candidate is going to be a Trumper, whether it's Trump himself or someone else.
Yeah, I mean, I think you have to in a lot of ways, you kind of separate Trump, the candidate or the person, from Trump, the agenda, because I think one thing we saw during Trump's term in office is that in general his agenda was successful. I mean, they had the right ideas and they did a lot of things, and we were in a lot better shape overall. Especially if you take COVID out of the picture and how it distorted things. It was a pretty good 4 years agenda wise, policy wise.
Right.
Trump himself. Trump is about Trump. I mean, he is who he is, and he's not going to change. He goes out and says Ron DeSanctimonious trying to give him a little hit, but at the same time he admits to voting for him, right?
Right. So I mean, I would put it this way: the thing that Trump did had to be done, and probably couldn't have been done by anybody else. But now it has been done, right? That thing is accomplished. Right, the way Republicans think and develop candidates and develop policy, right, is completely changed in the name of Trump. And things that shibboleths that we never touched for decades are out the window because Trump determined that they weren't viable. Right, he got rid of them. So, and that's what, yeah. Yeah, it'll be the same. That's right. It'll be the same with either one of them. And Florida was definitely the highlight of the night for GOP. Well, we'll see because you may end up with Arizona and or Nevada being the highlight. So
yeah, I mean, but I mean, you look at Florida really, since DeSantis came into office initially too, is that that had been a state that was really became kind of a battleground. It was tough sometimes for Republicans to break through, and yet here over the last several cycles we have seen a much bigger move towards the Republican Party in elections in Florida, so that it really has it's a pretty good R state at this point in
Yeah.
time.
It's not really a battleground state anymore. Neither
No.
is Ohio. Neither is Texas, really.
Yeah.
Right. Texas, Beto got thumped again. I mean, that was their big hope. All their statewide people that they had hope on. I was told, Texas people told me that, Beto would not win, but that the AG or lieutenant governor candidates could win. The Democrats could win, and they all got thumped. And I think that the states that are doing conservative policy are having success with it, and they're not going back. Right. And I don't think that, I don't know what'll end up happening in Arizona. And I will say that the lady did not do herself a lot of good with some of the stuff she did on her campaign, Carrie Lake. Trump battled the press, right? And he put them in their place, and he told them off, and he corrected their mistakes in their face and all this kind of stuff. But he did not lecture them about how he was going to educate them and teach them how to do their jobs and all this kind of stuff, right? It was very personal to her to attack the media. And one thing she does, though, that I think candidates should do is when people ask her a question, if she doesn't know who they are, she says, "Who are you and who are you from?" Right? So she knows the person's name and she knows the outlet that they supposedly represent, right? So I think that gets you out of a lot of trouble. You exactly know who you're talking to and what the agenda of the question is. Okay. But, hectoring the press is not, that doesn't do me any good as a voter, right? Yeah. You hate the press, in the final analysis, in the big picture, right? Hating on the press is not really a good strategy. It's like if you're a Republican, you're pursuing conservative policy, they're not going to be on your side. Right. But the idea that, your a daily course of your efforts is going to be focused on insulting the press is not productive. People don't look at that. They don't, what's in that for them. When I was a newspaper reporter, when I was in the press, I wrote this piece one time about how I had covered a football game in the rain. And I was literally, it was back in the old days before there were computers. I'm dictating a story. And I'm standing at a payphone in Spring Hill, Louisiana, up on the Louisiana-Arkansas border. And I am standing up to my ankles in water. And I'm just like, forget my shoes. They will never exist, right? And I'm just standing there with my feet getting soaked, talking on a telephone. That's probably not dangerous, right? Maybe why I'm like I am. And I'm dictating this story, right? And then so I wrote a little piece about, here's what I did. Here's how I got this story. Here's all the stuff that happened in this game and the rain and all this stuff. And editors like, guess what? No one cares what you did to get this story. 0 people care. They cared about the football game, but they don't care about you. Right. And so the piece was spiked. And I've always kept that in mind. It's like, they don't care about, if the story is the story, they're not going to, you're mad at the reporter. That personal bias against the reporter, that's a Carrie Lake thing. That's not a people of Arizona thing. And the idea that you're going to rope all the people of Arizona into your fight against the press, I don't think is prudent, right? And I think that's part of what was going on here, and I think that hurt her.
Yeah, that's probably detrimental. I mean, look, I mean, she was a former news anchor and whatnot, and so she's very well known. It's one thing to. I mean, you can call the media out on certain things for distorting the record or whatever, but constant,
keep it to that. Keep it to calling them out.
Right. But constantly trying to lecture them or something like that. There are going to be people. There are hardcore conservatives that lap up, at any kind of hatred towards the liberal media. But it's not the majority of the voters that are they concerned? That is not their number one issue. These elections. You have this opportunity. You talk about the Democrats and their failed policies and things like that. If you're Carrie Lake, you need to say, look, they've had a pretty good time under Governor Ducey. You want to be able to continue and improve upon things that the Republicans do in terms of keeping taxes low, and all these kind of things, and focus on these economic pocketbook issues. When things are at a 40-year high nationwide. Arizona, I mean, Spencer lives in Arizona. He knows the prices in Arizona are, they're high. I mean, gas prices are high. They're only slightly lower really in Arizona than they are in California. So, you talk to them about those issues. You can, go ahead and talk to 50 people or 25 people in a support group. And if you know they're anti-media, give them your anti-media speech or whatever. But this is not a broad-based campaign issue where you win. So yeah, I mean, I don't know. I mean, Carrie Lake could win in spite of herself.
Right.
Right? We got so many votes out there. We'll have to see how this all plays out. This is kind of interesting election in that sense. I do want to say one thing. Your story here about covering these high school games, and before computers, it does remind me of my high school days. So I became the football statistician.
I did that too. That was football.
And so as a result of that, one of the things that comes along with that duty on home games, at least here in Maryland, is that you were supposed to call the statistics in, the results in to the Post,
right?
For which I think they paid me $5 or $10 eventually, or so. I can't remember. They threw you a bone for doing that. But yeah, right. Before computers, that's all you could do. You basically, I had the stat book and I gave them the highlights of the statistical thing, and that's then I would look in the paper to see how much that got printed.
Yeah, my first job in journalism was answering those calls, was being the guy who took that down, and you had to do it where when you hung up the phone, you were done with that game. You had the stat package and the story written. Blunk, end, answer the phone, go again. Yeah,
I mean Montgomery County has 22, 23 high schools at the time, or whatever it was.
24 now.
Yeah, so they had you got to take all those calls, and that's just Montgomery County.
Yeah,
you have all the other jurisdictions that are reporting into PG and all these other things. So the sports section, remember the old Post sports section, you could go through and you could see the scores, and depending on how important the game was, you might see somebody might have actually covered the game and then picked up the stats, and then mixed them in, melded them all in. But there was a lot of reporting that used to have to go. A lot of stuff had to be covered by the paper, for the high school sports. And that was a big deal back.
Mostly abandoned now. Very little of that in there anymore.
Yeah, there's very little of any of that going on anymore. Those were the days.
That's right. So that's right. So Tony Gonzalez was a student of Bob's. So,
right. Yeah.
Speaking of people we personally know, how about the Neil Parrott?
Yeah. I mean, I was looking. I can't remember. Maybe you saw it. I didn't see the last update in terms of when they last updated the vote. But yeah, he's
like 52-48. It's not going to flip.
So far so good. I don't. I'll believe it when I see the final, everything being counted and everything like that, because there's always that caveat out there. But the very strong showing for Neil Parrott in a very bad Maryland year, which was expected. I mean, was it really above average bad? I mean, a standard issue Republican candidate, running for governor, do they really do better than Cox did on the regular? I don't think so. I have to go back to when like Ehrlich lost. I think the last time he lost, I think his percentages were very close to what Cox got, maybe a little bit above. I mean,
that's a standard Republican.
So that margin's not bad. I mean, but if you go back previous to like when Ellen Sauerbrey first ran, that was like 5,000 votes separated her and Glendenning.
3,400.
Yeah,
I remember this because we used to put this in the Montgomery Journal, and we'd say she lost by 3,400 votes, and Mark Tapscott would go berserk if you didn't also put out of 3.2 million cast, right? And it's like, you don't put 3.2 million cast, you were going to have a meeting in the glass house.
Yeah, and then the rematch was very different. I mean, she lost by much wider margin. It wasn't even close the second time around.
Right.
But I think Cox. Yeah, based on voter registration and everything like that, was it a horrible performance? No. The Democrats, then carried everything else pretty much. So, Neil's bucking the tide at this point. I think that also shows that how bad a candidate that David Trone is. I mean, if Trone loses his seat, it shows all that money, will have
he spent a ton of money. The Democrats spent a ton of money. They realized he was in trouble. We saw Parrott. Like me and MK saw him at a thing 3-4 weeks ago, maybe. And we asked him if he could win, if he thought he could win. And he said, if I get the turnout, I will win. And so we drive away, and she goes, what'd you think? And I'm like, that's a heavy lift, right, in that area and who he is and so forth. And the other guy's better known and so forth. But, it didn't work out that way.
Yeah, I mean, the district was redrawn, so it was I think there was a shot there. I mean, I know local Republicans here felt that, with turnout and a good ground game and some other factors, some other things going your way, you could do it. I mean, I think Trone. I mean, one of the, we talk about negatives when people campaign. I mean, I don't know if you saw his campaign ad, but one of the big features of one of his campaign ads was Neil Parrott and this whole thing about tattooing HIV, people, right? I just don't think that played well.
It looked like a reach. It's a long time. No one even remembers AIDS.
Yeah, and it was a distortion of the record on top of that. So it was something there. And I mean, Neil comes across. I've known Neil for many, many years because he's been in the state house, and he's a really solid Republican, really solid conservative guy. It's just that here's a guy that is pretty transparent, and he a family guy, man. He's been bucking the tide in the Maryland legislature for a number of years. So I'm crossing my fingers that the numbers hold, and that he does become the next congressman. And that's a huge thing in Maryland. That is a bright and shining light in Maryland, because the Democrats have spent so much time try to district out all Republicans. I mean, they really couldn't do anything with Andy Harris's district to do that. So there was always they've been trying, but they haven't succeeded. So we've always figured Andy Harris is kind of like, that's the one guy you get. But if Andy Harris can get joined by Neil Parrott, that's that gives Republicans some hope. I don't know how many Republicans really thought that Cox was going to win this race. Wes Moore was not a great candidate, but Dan Cox was just not the guy, and as soon as Cox won the nomination, that pretty much sealed the deal for Moore, because he didn't have to be a good candidate. I mean, Joe Biden goes and campaigns for him. It's like, why does Joe Biden go campaign for Wes Moore? Because no one else really wanted Joe Biden to campaign for them. Right?
It wouldn't hurt. You really couldn't hurt Wes Moore.
Well, no, he wasn't going to hurt Moore. That's exactly right. So bring your president. Bring them out here to Maryland, because it won't hurt them at this stage. This was kind of baked into the cake already, and everything like this. What's interesting will be some of the there's another local election. I think it's the Anne Arundel County Executives race. The wife of the MD GOP chair is ahead. Now there's like 42,000 plus uncounted, mail-in ballots, and they lean heavily D in terms of the registration, the numbers coming in. We don't know if they all voted D. So she's got a slim lead, Jessica Hare. That would be a big upset if she could pull this off. If she could somehow hold on when all the votes are counted, that would be a big deal for Maryland Republicans, is to capture that, because they haven't held that for a number of years, and they could turn some of that tide, because some of those local races got flipped on them over the last couple of cycles, and they need to get some of that momentum back. Where the
thing is, like, don't put it past her, because a quiet little story here that from what I can tell is that the balance between Democrats and Republicans on early voting and vote by mail had decreased some during this election. So, we always assume that pile of votes is 95% Democrat or whatever. I don't think it was this time. I think it came down some. We're not there yet. And when you early vote, you lose the impact of your election day voting, right? So,
yeah, I mean,
we moved a little closer to parity on that today.
Yeah, I mean, in Anne Arundel County, I mean, the numbers, if it was all straight party voting, I mean, then then Pittman, he gains enough to win, because there's a slug of independent or unaffiliated, which could go either way. I don't, what I don't know, is that how much the Democrats are voting straight, party line on that in Anne Arundel County, or do they see that Jessica Hare is a fresh face and they need a change there, and they cross party lines for that? Because there was definitely, we definitely saw some diversion, in going on there, because I think Lake is closer to Hobbs, right, than Masters was to Kelly, I think, in Arizona.
Right.
And you look in Georgia, where you've got a runoff, pretty much guaranteed, I think, of the state, is that, Warnock outperformed, Stacey Abrams, and Herschel Walker underperformed Brian Kemp. And that created that virtual tie. I mean, Warnock's ahead by like 18,000 at the last count I saw. But this Oliver, this independent candidate, or whatever affiliation that had, I mean, that got 80,000 votes. Well, that's enough to flip the election.
Right.
And who has more momentum going forward? I don't know. To me, I don't know. I mean, I don't think Herschel is out of it. I mean, if it's just Warnock versus Walker, Walker could possibly win this thing.
Yeah, he could win.
Yeah. And I kind of wonder too, when you have like Gretchen Whitmer beating Tudor Dixon, does abortion, where that was on the ballot for state constitutional amendment, does that kind of gave Whitmer a little bit more wind at her back, for that, more people turning out to do that in a blue state? So, do some of these side issues affect, how some of that wound up turning out? I mean, Tudor Dixon didn't seem to be a terrible candidate. I mean, she seemed to fight pretty well overall, but
yeah, she was another one of those ones that came back late, fell short, like we were talking about last week.
And I mean, we still have like the Oregon governor's race, right? It's pretty tight.
It's tight, but it looks like the Democrats going to win.
Yeah. So I went, but it'll be a close one. I mean, I think it'll be close, even if the Democrat wins. It's
shots across the bow. I think they won an extra seat or two in Congress out there too.
Yeah. So
a couple they didn't think they were going to win.
Yeah. And then there, Virginia. I mean, Spanberger won. Kiggins. I mean, I think that race, I think they pretty much expected her to beat Luria there. Wexton and Cow, I don't think anybody really expected much to change there.
Well, so I drove that whole district in the course of playing basketball and all that kind of stuff. And if the signs voted, Cal would have won overwhelmingly. And he really probably had 80-90% of the signs that were in that district. And he made a good run at it. I don't think anybody expected that, it would take the last dump of votes from Prince William or from Manassas to beat him, right? I think it was kind of assumed she would win easily, and she did not win easily. And the same with Spanberger. It took her, getting the last votes from Prince William to win. So, there's work to be done, but they got a lot closer than they were in both of those districts.
Yeah, I'm trying to think of what happened down south. In Texas, what happened with that? Was it Cuellar's race? I didn't look to see.
I thought Cuellar was ahead.
I'm trying to see here real quick just what district that is.
I think it's 34. I don't know why I think
it's 28. Okay, I just found it. Yeah. Oh, he's comfortably ahead. Yeah. Yeah. That's it. Yeah, he 56-43, 87% of the vote by the CNN count. So yeah, that wasn't even close for that one. And then Maya Flores lost, but on the new district lines, that was not exactly surprising there either. Right. But I mean, Republicans getting the House, decisive W, definitely. And that's not. I mean, Cuellar's. He kind of knows what he has to do there anyway.
Right, and he's not he's a sensible vote too. He's not the squad.
So. Right. I saw that report. Saw the report that the squad, there was like 4 people who's probably going to win election. That'll expand the squad to like 10 members. So there's still a progressive, slowly building progressive movement in there. So they'll probably be just loud, noisy, and just a pain in the rear end.
Right.
But when
being the minority,
losing control of the House, really puts them on the fringe and makes them so irrelevant.
right?
It's I'm not quite sure what AOC does with a Republican-controlled majority, except make a bunch of videos or something or other. I don't know.
Right.
And all of
Get
that.
her nails done as an act of personally reclaiming her time or whatever it was.
Yeah, and this is true about Cuellar, right?
Right. That's right.
On that. And I meant to say too, I mean, I think there was a report, was it in New York? Was it Sean Patrick Maloney, the head of the DCC?
Right. Knocked out.
He's in danger, right? Wasn't he losing?
He is lost. I think he's conceded.
Did he concede? Ooh.
Yeah.
What district was that? Let me see. I need to see this here. I apologize for not knowing which districts these people in, but it isn't my state. Let me see here. See who can find it
The
first.
New York Times says he concedes to Mike Lawler.
Wow. What district was that?
That is 17.
17. Okay. All right. Yeah. So the CNN board I used 98% in, Lawler at 50.6, 3,000 votes ahead yet. So okay, the New York Times said he conceded. That's a good one there. That's a nice takedown there for the Republicans, is take that guy out.
Now, the other thing is, so moving forward, right? What does this mean for 2024, right? So candidates, what does this say for Joe Biden? So you lost both houses of Congress, or you well could. You're not going to get a lot done. There's already questions about your cognitive health. Right? Did the Democrats, are they, now that they avoided the red wave, are they going to stick with Joe? And who knows what happens on our side? DeSantis was sending signals that he was not thinking about 2024, right? He was thinking about 2028. So does that put Trump back in the driver's seat? If he does run, it's probably him to start with, but then you get some other people in there. Pompeo is a strong candidate. People sleep on him, but he actually knows how all this stuff works, and he doesn't look like a hair on fire guy, right? He doesn't have the hard edge, right? He looks more palatable probably to some of the people in the political middle. What can happen? One of the things Democrats said before this is like, hey, if you elect the Republicans, they're going to ruin the economy for 2 years just to make Biden look bad so they can win the election. And they might well do that. You could have some debt ceiling fights and that kind of stuff coming up, right? You have debt ceiling runs out later this year. I think it has to be dealt with in a lame duck Congress. So, there's a lot going on out there, looking ahead to 2024.
Yeah, I mean, this is going to be interesting because we had Biden, who said that he wasn't going to make a decision until after the midterms, and then we have Trump saying there'll be like a big announcement on November 15th, but the Republicans didn't do they didn't come out as strongly as people had as those overhyped predictions. So and some of his candidates did not perform as well. So does that mean that Trump's announcement is that I'm not going to run, versus if they had done better overall, that he would have possibly run? What happened? What do you do with Joe? And what do you do with Joe Biden? If Joe Biden decides at this point in time, makes an announcement here in the next few weeks or months or whatever, that he's not going to run again, what is that? That makes him a lame duck president. And then what happens to the Democrat agenda at that point?
Right.
So that's a huge risk for them.
And who is their contender? Right. Who's
right.
going to be? Are you really going to put Kamala Harris up? No, you're not. Right? You're not. I mean, they know. I think they can. They can see what would happen there. Right?
Yeah. I mean, does that mean that Gavin Newsom starts, beating the drum?
Gavin Newsom, could be. He won comfortably yesterday. Buttigieg. Elizabeth Warren, who knows? But I mean, none of those people are, they're all tried and true failures on the national stage. So, I think this is not the like dark night of winter that a lot of Republicans, a lot of Democrats are trying to paint it as, and Republicans are acknowledging today, because, it sets up 2024 in Republicans' advantage in a lot of ways.
Yeah, and we know, having been through this many times in our lifetime, of where you've kind of got a gridlock Congress because you've got the House and the Senate controlled by opposite parties. If that does remain the case, that's not the worst case scenario for the country overall, because the Democrats definitely, since they've had this complete control, they've been trying to ram through spending packages and all this kind of stuff, that have had a detrimental effect on this. Though, as Joe Biden thinks that he's been bringing down the deficit by record numbers.
Right.
I gotta love the Washington Post fact checker. I mean, we've criticized them in the past, but you gotta love them where even he gave Joe Biden bottomless Pinocchios for some of the statements they've been making on these kinds of things lately. Which is the first time I've seen that used. I remember Glenn Kessler ever using bottomless Pinocchios. So I think
he used it on Trump, the border wall, which was ridiculous to me, because his grounds for saying that was a lie was that it was a bollard fencing and not an actual concrete wall. I mean, it was a wall. You couldn't get over it.
Yeah. So it'll be very interesting to see how this all comes out there. One other thing too, I kind of have run through here. Two things that I want to quickly mention: the LA mayor's race. So it's just a little bit like when Richard Riordan ran, right?
Mm-hmm.
You can't really run as a Republican, in LA. It's kind of tough. So you kind of change your affiliation, but have those kind of Republican principles or whatever.
Right. You're not a Democrat.
Not a Democrat, and giving Karen Bass, quite a run for her money. So that wasn't called as the surprise. I think too, is Lauren Boebert. She's trailing as of early this morning. It may turn around. I don't know, but that's a race that I don't think anybody really saw was going to even be close.
Yeah, I don't know. We need to think about like the image the women on our side project, right? And she's wanted, her thing was, she's kind of like Kari Lake. She wanted to, go insult everybody. It's like, okay, you're free to insult people and they'll stick a mic in your face as long as you're in Congress, right? But does that any more effectively deal with people's problems than what Joe Biden's doing? Not really, right? Like, tell me how you're going to, if you want to be on, hard emotional issues, I mean, talk to me about what you're going to do to help, no twerking, trans twerking in kindergarten, right? Get on something like that and make that your cause. But just, you guys are all, America hating idiots. That doesn't win votes. So I wouldn't be surprised if she loses. She's behind a pretty good bit. There's some votes to count, but she's got a hill to climb.
Yeah. So, I mean, and this is, once again, I mean, this happens in politics. I'm not really sure what Lauren Boebert has accomplished in 2 years in Congress. She's gotten a lot of FaceTime, but I don't,
It's not really good FaceTime,
Yeah. Yeah. And I saw this morning on CNN, as one of the political commentators there was Mia Love, the former congresswoman from, Utah. I like Mia Love. She's a nice person. I've met her, but she was not an effective congresswoman, at all. And so when she lost her race, no big surprise. And, in Utah, I didn't think that was a big loss.
Right. And the other thing, so people understand, yes, Utah is the most Republican state in the nation, right? But one of those congressional districts is drawn, it's basically Salt Lake City, is drawn to be won by a Democrat, right? The Mathesons controlled it for a long time, that seat, right? So it's like there's three now, right? Three in the House from Utah, and one of them is almost certain to be a Democrat almost every time. Mia Love had won that seat.
Yeah, except that was the seat that was the last time around. That was the one that Burgess Owen beat McAdams, right?
Okay.
I don't even know who he faced. That was the other thing about Utah too, is that I know there were people in Utah, some people in Utah that were concerned about the Lee McMullen race, but Lee took that control. But the Democrats, I mean, McAdams is, he's made a big deal about, how he pushed for that. He says, this was the most consequential, kind of, election in Utah in 50 years because it gives the Democrats some hope that. But McMullen, it was a weird race where you have the independent basically running, he wasn't running as a Democrat, but he really was a Democrat because he was endorsed, because the Democrats put all their effort behind him. They didn't bother nominating their own candidate. It was a whole mess. So I think I said last week, I mean, I was hoping that, what's kind of the last we see politically of Charlie Crist, Stacey Abrams, and Beto. I'd like to throw Evan McMullen to that list as well, because I'm sick and tired of that guy as well. One of the best things I saw post-election, was I think it was on Instagram, and maybe it was somewhere else as well, by National Review on Beto, is that they showed that he spent 178 million dollars on losing back-to-back elections.
Yeah.
There's a ton of money.
It looks like it could work, but it doesn't work. There's no there.
Yeah. Okay. And he's got to be the poster child. It's like, for that kind of money, and he didn't win any of those races. It's like, why would anybody support him for even dog catcher at this point?
Yeah, you got to prove he could get support to go. He needs to go find a congressional race that he can win.
Yeah.
Right. Somewhere out like West Texas, that's where he's from, right? El Paso. So go do that and get into something that you can win. You're not going to be the big shot. You'll be a minority congressman probably when you start, and work your way up. Right. But trying to cherry pick one off the top is not going to work, because he's just not. And Texas is becoming more red. Florida is becoming more red. Ohio is becoming more red. Nevada is becoming more red. Arizona is becoming more red. So, it was not a night in the woods last night. There's some good things happening.
Yeah, Bob and I are on the same wavelength. All right.
Yeah. I find that guy particularly obnoxious too.
He's like,
there's Democrats. I don't want the Democrats to win, but some of them, I don't really have anything personal against them. I just think they're on the wrong side of the policy. But this is an arrogant little twerp who tries to get things he doesn't deserve.
Yeah, he's more objectionable and more than a lot of Democrats we know, right? I mean, This is. But I could have sworn yesterday that I saw something about Beto. Some people were saying he ought to move to Louisiana and run.
Yeah, I go over well there. I think Trump won Louisiana by 32 points. I don't know if they're. I mean, Louisiana does have a Democrat governor, but he is very much in the old blue dog Democrat tradition. And good luck, Beto. I don't know if it's going to go over too well.
Is there a place for Beto somewhere? All right, we've reached we're running up against the end of the hour here, so let's wrap this up. The last word. What you got, Brian?
Well, good luck in the next election or whatever. We'll sign off on that topic. But I did want to tell you that on Saturday night, I've been a sports fan all my life, as you know. And, I had about the best 10 minutes a man can have, right? So the Astros won the World Series. And while they were sorting all that out, LSU dumped Alabama, right? LSU scored at the end of the game and then went for two rather than going for, kick the point and go overtime with Alabama. They're like, forget that. We're going right now. And they made it. And so they beat Alabama, and LSU is now the 7th ranked team in the country. But to be like a lifelong fan of those two teams and to see them make that accomplishment in that short a period of time. I mean, my remote battery has to be changed. All that, dog. But it was a great night, Saturday night. Great night for LSU and the Astros.
Yeah, you notice I do cater to some of your sports needs, when I prepare the list. Your fandom. Now, congratulations to the Astros. I mean, they had a great team this year. They did it. It was a little troublesome after the first 3 games, but boy, they came back and just really took it to to the Phillies. The Phillies
Yeah.
sputtered. I mean, they stopped hitting.
Yeah.
You know,
Well, we pitched pretty good.
the
That's an
pitching was better.
unbelievable
Yeah,
bullpen.
basically, once you got past McCullers, you guys were fine.
Yeah,
You know,
that's right.
And the bullpen, the Astros bullpen was lights out. Just lots of things. But I mean, Jose Altuve, no RBIs in the postseason. That's very odd.
Yeah.
He didn't hit at all really in the initial round, and he finally found a little bit of a swing in the World Series, but they didn't need that in the end.
Yeah.
And the Astros, yeah, I mean, it's so I had to throw this out. I threw out a question to Buster Olney and about Dusty Baker now that he's won the World Series, and given his age, how much longer does Dusty manage? I mean, he's now won a World Series as a player and as a manager. And Buster Olney, I mean, this kind of surprised me. He basically said, looking at the Astros, he figured that the Astros will pay Dusty to have him move on because they're going to change their front office and they're going to change the manager. So that's his prediction.
Will be announced as our manager for 2023 in a press conference in an hour.
Well,
incorrect. It looks like they're talking to the general manager too. General manager is in Las Vegas at the GM's meeting without a contract. He's not the only one. Brian Cashman and the Yankees doesn't have one either. But
and that's why Buster said that. I think is that because the contract's up and that they're looking at this guy they're looking at the Milwaukee guy, Stearns, right? Because his wife's from Houston and whatever, and they think he would be a prime target for them to go after. And if that happened, that could mean a change on for
there was some friction between the owner and the GM. There was a little bit of disagreement. I don't know how serious it is. They don't they don't talk to me about this stuff, but
but they should.
I keep them
and as far as LSU goes, I think it's been a surprisingly good season because because there were so many questions about Brian Kelly and his faux Southern accent in his video and all this kind of stuff. But that was a very bold thing to go and do this. It's like I'm either going to lose this game or I'm going to win this game. And there's going to be just no questions asked about this and do this. And, and Alabama is not as good as they've been in years past. So this was an opportunity. I mean, go ahead and stick it to Saban. And, now, they're out of the playoffs, unless
they're out and we could be in. I mean, that's right. It's a long shot. We win all the rest of our games. We win the SEC championship game. It's hard to turn down the SEC champion.
Right.
The Big Four.
It'll be very interesting going in here. We still got a few more games to play, but we'll see how this all shakes out. But Georgia is strong.
They are. Well, as my LSU fans, we're all scoping out our trip to the national championship game. I'm like, well, all we have to do is win all our games and then beat a team that beat us by 4 touchdowns.
Yeah.
Right. So, I mean, it's an uphill battle, but you got to remember where Kelly started, right? They had our bowl game last year. We had 38 players. Okay. That's a small high school team. Right. And so he had to go find like 55 or 60 guys in the portal between the recruits and the portal. I mean, we have 60 new players this year on our team. That's an enormous number. So, they've done a ton. They have 2 freshman tackles, which no one plays with 2 freshman tackles. So a lot of credit to Brian Kelly. He's done an incredible thing there.
Yep. So good way to end the program is on our sports note. Thanks everyone for joining us today. Hope you enjoyed it. Please, as always, stay safe, stay well. Remember, we live in the greatest country in the world. And I think our elections prove that. I mean, we argue a lot about elections and all these kinds of things, but it's it works for us, and I think far less turmoil than a lot of other countries in the world.
That's right.
So I'll take this system any day of the week.
Absolutely.
And as always, please join us again next week. God bless America, and just enjoy the time we got. We'll see what the elections bring, and we'll scope it out and see what other results we're going to have to discuss next week. So see you then. Bye-bye.